it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, we're going to learn how to knit this fun little grape soda scarf. This was designed as a kid's scarf, but later on in the video, I'll show you how to make it if you want it to be longer, like a standard size scarf. But it's a nice, cute little scarf. We're going to be using a yarn cake to make the scarf, so the color work will be done all for you. And we're going to learn how to make this fun stitch with just a yarn over and a knit two together. So it makes a really interesting kind of diagonal looking stitch. And then we're going to add some pom-poms to the bottom. Now, like I mentioned before, this is a kid size scarf, but you can make it longer. This scarf is 32 inches long, and then the pom-poms add a couple more inches, so it's about 38 inches from one end of the pom-pom to the other. And this is going to be really easy to knit. We're going to learn how to cast on our scarf. We're going to learn how to knit the scarf, bind off the scarf, and then make the pom-poms together. So let's get started. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, a tape measure is super helpful to get the length that you need. We're going to be using a pair of US 8 knitting needles. These are 5mm knitting needles. And we're also going to be using one cake of Lion Brand's Mandala Ombre. Now each cake of this is 344 yards or 315 meters. So if you need to substitute yarn, look for on your yarn label a medium 4 on the yarn weight scale, and this has a needle recommendation of 4.5mm, which you may notice is a little bit different than the 5mm that we'll be using. I went up just a little bit on the needle just to give it a little bit more drape. But if you look for that medium 4 on the yarn weight scale, 344 yards of that, and you'll be just fine. So let's get started. Okay, so to begin, we're going to cast on. I'm going to just need one needle for this. Now grab your yarn. I grabbed mine from the center of my cake. And we're going to grab one end, we're going to do about a wingspan. That means like if you outstretch your arms, you'll give yourself plenty of yarn. We're going to do the long tail cast on. So I did like a wingspan of yarn. That's our little tail here. What we're going to do is put a slip knot on our needle, and that will make our first stitch, okay? So wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop. I'm going to get a little bit more yarn here. Reach in with your needle, bring up that loop, and tighten, okay? Now, if you're proficient at knitting, then you can kind of skip through this part. But I know a lot of you have told me that you'd like to learn how to knit. So I'm going to go nice and slow and kind of go through all the steps. If you are a seasoned knitter, you can kind of skip ahead a little bit if you want to. Okay, so what we're going to do is, like I said, the long tail cast on. So what you want to do is hold your needle kind of up in the air. And let me zoom out so you can sort of see how I'm holding this. Hold your needle up in the air, and you have on your left here, your long tail. On your right is your yarn that's connected to your cake, okay? So what you're going to do is let that kind of hang down like this, and you're going to take your index finger and your thumb, and you're going to come in from the back with and go in between those two pieces of yarn that we talked about. And then I like to take my pinky and kind of like clamp it down at the bottom. Now open it up, and it'll make like a diamond shape. See that? See that diamond shape? Then what we're going to do is we're going to cast on a stitch. So this counts as one of our stitches. We're going to go up under our thumb and pick up a loop. Go around our finger and pick up that yarn. And now bring that through your thumb loop, just like that. And then sort of let go. I'm not letting go at the bottom. I'm just letting go at the top. And just sort of snug it up. Not too tight, because we're going to go back in and work these stitches, okay? Now, take your index finger and your thumb again and sort of open it back up to make that diamond. And now let's do that again. We're going to do this a couple times kind of slow, and then we'll pick up speed in a minute. Okay, so what we're going to do is go around our thumb, go through the finger, and then through that thumb loop, and then just snug up the yarn, okay? So now we have 3 stitches, okay? Let's try that again. Open up your diamond, around the thumb, go around the finger, and through the thumb loop. Every time I make a knitting video, there is a poem that goes along, around, and through. And then also there's one for knitting. So if you know either one of those, share in the comments below, because I can't remember what it is right now. All right, let's try that again. Make your diamond, go around, and through, snug it up. Around, through, snug it up. Round, through, round, through. Okay, so let's see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to cast on 30 stitches. For this pattern, you can do any even multiple. So any even number, you'll be just fine. Okay, so we have 8. We're going to do 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, pushing back if needed, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, pushing it back, 27, 28, 29, and 30, okay? So here is our cast on stitches. Now, if you notice, our tail is pretty long. If that bothers you, you can sort of trim it back a little bit just to, let me grab my scissors. You can sort of trim it back a little just to get it out of your way if it's too excessive. I always do a little more than I think because with long tail, you sort of have to guess a little bit. So I always give myself a little extra than I think. To begin our scarf, we're just going to do a couple of rows of just knit stitches to give us a nice little like solid framed edge. The rest of our scarf is going to be kind of lacy, so we're going to just give it a nice kind of solid edge on either end as we make our scarf, okay? So for row 1, we're going to just knit all the stitches, okay? So to knit a stitch, what we're going to do is take our project is on the left, so we're going to hold that in our left hand. We're going to just keep our tail out of the way and not worry about it right now. And our needle that we're going to be using is in our right hand, okay? So what we're going to do is go into that first stitch and come up under. We're going to catch that loop and come up under the needle, just like that. And then we're going to wrap the yarn around that bottom needle only, and then we're going to knit the stitch. So we're going to take this needle, slide it around, catching that loop. See how I caught that loop there? Bring it to the front and push it off. And that's it. Then what we're going to do is take and do the next stitch. Okay? Bring the needle up under, wrap the yarn around that bottom needle only, bring that needle from the back to the front and push it off. Now see how my tail, you might need to kind of give it a little tightening in those first few stitches. Now sometimes, especially when you're starting off with knitting, it can be a little snug and tight. Just go nice and slow and take your time. Okay, we're just knitting all these stitches to start. It's kind of like a warm-up in a way before we start on the super easy lace that we'll be doing next. So come up under that next stitch, wrap the yarn around that bottom needle, bring the needle from the back to the front, catching that loop, push it off the edge. Let's go and do the next stitch. Knit the next stitch. We'll pick up speed in just a minute. Knit the next stitch. And just do this all the way across. Try to keep your hands relaxed so that your stitches aren't too tight. Sometimes when we cast on, it's a little snug, that first row. But if you keep your hands relaxed and keep a nice even tension, but not too tight of a tension, you'll be able to get your needle in there just fine, okay? So again, we're just knitting all the rows. And if we need to kind of push things up a little bit halfway through, just going to keep knitting all the way across, okay? Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of speed here. And likewise, you can push things back on the other needle, okay? And just keep knitting those stitches all the way across, okay? Now again, if you're a seasoned knitter, feel free to skip ahead. We're going to go through this kind of one thing at a time here, okay? All right, just working my knit stitches all the way across here. Pushing things over, sliding things up, however I need to get it to the ends of the needles here. Okay, and then we're at those last few stitches and just knit those two same way. And that very last one, okay? So now if you notice, my work is now my right hand. I've passed it from one needle to the other. So what we're going to do for row 2 is we're going to put it back in our other hand. Make sure that working yarn, the working yarn is the yarn that feeds into your project from your yarn cake. And we're just going to repeat the same row. So we're just going to knit all the stitches once again. I'm going to kind of zip through this because we've done it slowly once. You just want to knit all those stitches all the way across. Okay. All right, coming up to the end of row 2, again, we're just doing all knit rows to start, okay? All right, once again, pass your work to the other hand, get everything all straightened out. For row 3, we're going to do the same thing, just knit all the rows, okay? Every stitch all across, just knit all those rows, okay? By now, you should feel a little bit more looseness in your work as you work your stitches. You still might need to kind of push things up, but things have kind of relaxed a little bit. Once we get that cast on edge off of that needle, it kind of loosens up a little bit. Okay, so for row 3, we're just knitting all the stitches all the way across. And if you're beginning, don't worry about your speed when you begin. Just worry about accuracy and taking your time and make sure you're doing your stitches properly. And the speed will just come the more you practice. It just happens all by itself. Okay? All right. Working row 3. Now we haven't, as a side note with my yarn here, we have some really fun, pretty colors coming up with this shades of purple. But we're still in this like pale, it's almost like a pale speckly lilac. It's fun. So I'm excited to see, as we work a little bit more on our scarf, how these colors are going to play out. So if you're using a cake yarn, also share below what you're using and what color you're using. All right, I'm just doing that last stitch. All right, same thing for row 4. This is the last row of all knit stitches, okay? So just go in there and knit all those stitches for this row as well, okay? Our next row will begin our beautiful, simple, easy lace. I know sometimes people hear the word lace and it seems complicated, but this is a very, very easy lace. Very easy. No purling, nothing complicated. Okay, so row 4, just keep knitting those stitches all the way across. This is going to give us a nice little edge, and it'll look visually kind of framed in and finished when our scarf is complete. Okay, whoops, just keep working across. All right, we're coming up to the end of row 4. I'm going to get some more yarn here. You can see some colors that are going to be coming up in just a bit. Just knit all those stitches. Okay, so now we have our beautiful frame, our nice, easy all knit stitch frame. Doesn't look like much right now. It's sort of just like a smushed up mess on our needles. It doesn't look like much, but it will kind of play out in a minute. Okay, so now for row 5. Row 5 is the row you'll repeat over and over and over again for the rest of your scarf, except those last 4 rows, because we're going to mimic what we did here. Remember to frame it in, okay? So for row 5, let me just show you how it's done. So what you're going to do, now we pass the work to our other hand like we've been doing. What we're going to do for this row is we're going to knit 2, 1, 2, and then we're going to do a little increase and a decrease all at once to kind of create some decorative holes, okay, in our work. So what we want to do is do a yarn over, then knit 2 together, okay? We're going to do that across to create some pretty lace. So for yarn over, wrap the yarn around that bottom needle only, and then for our knit 2 together, we're going to knit it the same way, but instead of going into one stitch, we're going to go into 2 stitches like that, okay? And then take your yarn, wrap it around that bottom needle only, and then pass it from the bottom to the top, picking up that loop and push it off. Now it's not going to look like much right now. It'll start to play out after a row or two. You'll see what all your lovely stitch work. Okay, let's do that again. Yarn over, wrap it around that bottom needle only, that right needle, and then take your right needle and go up under 2 stitches for our knit 2 together. Wrap the yarn around that bottom needle and knit the stitch as you normally would. All right, let's pick that up. We're going to do this all the way across till the last 2 stitches. Remember, I knit 2 at the beginning of the row. That will also sort of give us a nice little edge. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 2 together, pushing things up if you need to. Yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together. Notice I'm going nice and slow. Yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together. You might need to push some things down like we did before. Yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together. Look, we have 4 stitches left, so let's yarn over, knit 2 together, and then we'll finish up our row by just knitting the last 2 stitches. So knit the next stitch, knit the last stitch, and row 5 is complete, okay? So like I said, it doesn't look like much right now. It's sort of a little jumbly. It's really short and small still. But as you work row 5 a few more times, you'll start to notice some decorative holes and some lovely lace work kind of opening up on your piece. So let's repeat row 5 over and over and over again. But make sure as you're working through your cake or your skein or whatever you're using, make sure that you save enough yarn to do 4 rows at the end and bind off, okay? So we're going to just save enough yarn to do those last few rows, okay? So just save a couple of yards and you'll be just fine, okay? So let's repeat row 5 over and over and over again. When we come back, I'll give you a measurement of what I have so far and we'll finish up our scarf. Okay, just working the last 2 stitches of our lacy section. And I just wanted to show you, we have some wonderful progress and the colors are playing out nicely. Now my scarf, because it is a kid size scarf, is 32 inches long. Now we still need to frame it in and do our all knit stitches to finish, which we're going to do in a minute. But you can keep going with yours, and as a matter of fact, I have a good bit of yarn still left, but we're going to add 2 fabulous pom-poms to either end of our scarf just to add a little bit more fun to it. But if you prefer, you can just keep going with your yarn and it'll be quite a bit longer than what I have here, but I wanted to make mine a kid's length. So the last thing we're going to do for the knit part of our scarf before we move on to the pom-poms is we need to frame it in. Now if you remember, we did 4 rows of knit stitches at the beginning to kind of frame it in, and you can see because we did the knit stitches at the beginning and then the 2 knit stitches at either end, it's sort of framed in our lace a little bit. So all we're going to do for the next 4 rows, the last 4 rows rather, is to knit all the stitches. So go ahead for 4 rows. This will be the first row of 4, and just knit all the stitches all the way across. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and knit my 4 rows of knit stitches only, and then we'll rejoin in just a minute, and we're going to bind off our scarf and start working on our lovely pom-poms. So again, if you want to just have like a traditional scarf, you can go ahead and just keep going until you basically run out of yarn but have enough to bind off. Just a couple yards for that. So just keep going, either knitting your scarf till the length you want, or working these last 4 knit rows to finish off the scarf. Okay, I worked the 4 rows of all knit stitches, just coming up to the end of that. And now we're ready to bind off. Now again, you can keep going with yours for as long as you want, but when you're ready to bind off, if you've never done this before, it's super easy. All you're going to do is knit 2 stitches to start, just like you normally would. So knit 2 stitches. And then what you're going to do is that first stitch that you knit, you're going to take your left needle and you're going to lift it up, over, and off of that other stitch. Knit another stitch, do the same thing. We're just going to do this all the way across. Lift it up, over, and off. If it's too hard with your needles, you could pick it up with your finger and lift it as well. Some people like to do that instead. Knit another stitch, do the same thing. Lift it up, over, and off. And we're just doing this all the way across. Okay, when you get towards the end, you just have 1 stitch left. Just go ahead and knit that last stitch as well. And then I like to snug it up a little bit just so it's nice and neat at the end there. Then what you're going to do is you're just going to lift that very last stitch off, and then you'll have 1 stitch left. Grab a pair of scissors, leave yourself a tail so you can weave it in, and then you're just going to sort of loosen this up, hold the loop, don't let go, and send your tail that you just cut through that loop. Just like that, and then sort of like snug it down. Now the last thing you'll do for your scarf before we move on to the pom-pom. Oh, and I wanted to mention, I had different needles at the beginning of this video. I switched off just randomly, and I wanted to let you know this is the same size. They're just different looking. So in case you were wondering, I meant to say that earlier. So sometimes I switch needles here and there. So we're going to just take our tapestry needle, thread it. Now my yarn split, so you might, if you need to give it a fresh cut, that might help a little. Give it a twist and then send it through, and that usually helps. Because our scarf has some variegated yarn, we're going to just kind of stay in the same color area. Our scarf has a nice little color block effect, so just stay in that area so your tail will blend. Okay, so I just went in one direction with my tail, and I'm just going to come back in the other direction just to kind of lock it into place. Give it a snip, and now go down to the other end. Now if you use multiple balls of yarn, you might have some more ends, but because we used a cake here for the one that I'm doing, we just have 2 ends, one at the beginning and one at the end. So I'm just going to do the same thing down at the other end with the other tail, and just go in a ways, and then just come back in the other direction with your tail. And then we're just going to give it a trim. Okay, the last thing we need to do, if you want, it's totally optional, but the next thing we need to do is make some pom-poms, okay? So our scarf looks really cute. It's very small and cute for a child. Again, you can take yours longer if you need to. But I'm just going to kind of scoot this out of the way for a minute because we're going to work on our pom-pom. Now, if you look at your yarn cake, you might want to study it a little bit because my scarf here happens to have a purple end and like a white end, or it's very pale lavender. And my next color that I've been working on is purple because that's where I left off. So just to kind of mix it up a little bit, what I'm going to do is down at this lighter end, I'm going to put the darker purple pom-pom, and then I'm going to kind of dig back in my yarn cake here and make the light purple white color down at the purple end just to mix it up, okay? So when you're making your pom-pom, you might want to try and plan a little bit that way. Okay, so let's come back to our pom-pom. What we're going to do, if you've never made a pom-pom before, I don't use any fancy tools, I just make them in my hand. You're going to pull a length of yarn out about 18 inches long. It's a little extra than you need, so that's a good thing because you need to be able to tie it on. And then all we're going to do is we're going to take our yarn in our hand, let it fall down the front of your hand, and we're just going to start wrapping. So wrap around your all 4 fingers. We're just going to start wrapping it around all 4 fingers. Now, if you want a tiny pom-pom, you could wrap it around 3 fingers or 2 fingers, but we want a nice big full pom-pom, so we're going to do all 4 fingers. So just wrap it around all 4 fingers. 265, 266, 267, 268, 269, 270, 271, 272, 273, 274, and 275. So I did 275 wraps around. Now, what we're going to do is scoot everything out of the way, and we're going to lay our yarn down flat. Just sort of like prep a spot here, and then carefully slip the bundle off of your hand. It might be a little snug, it's lots of yarn, but we want to make this nice and big and fluffy. Keep those 2 tails pointing towards the bottom, and then carefully take your bundle off of your hand and lay it down. Now, the bigger you make your bundle, the trickier it is because it's a lot of yarn, okay? So I also need to cut my yarn. I didn't do that. All right, so take your 2 yarn pieces, and we have it laid down right in the middle there, and we're just going to tie our bundle. And you want to tie this nice and tight as possible without breaking the yarn. It's easy to do that with all this yarn. For a more permanent pom-pom, to keep it from coming apart later, you can also, before you tie this, put a little bead of hot glue down the length of this string before you tie it. So you can do that, and just try to get it as snug as possible. And you can even tie it twice if you want to get another piece of yarn, just because it's such a big bulky pom-pom. And around your bundle here, if you want to just tie it 2 times just for good measure, you can do that as well. And again, if you put a little on this yarn here, if you put a little glue down, it will kind of like bond and lock it in place. Okay, so just go ahead and tie your yarn the best you can. Now take your handles. We have 4 now because I did 2 strands, but we have this bundle now. So hold it. It almost looks like a jellyfish. Hold your bundle like this, and I like to kind of scrunch it up just to see where everything's at. And then you're going to take a pair of scissors. Grab a large pair because it's a lot of cutting, and we're just going to cut all of the loops. Be very careful not to cut this band where we tied it on, because your pom-pom will fall apart. But just sort of go through this whole thing and cut all the loops that you see. Just don't dig too deep, because you'll cut your band that's kind of holding it all together. Okay, so go through and see, you can see like layers of loops as we wrapped. We did many wraps on our pom-pom. Okay, so go through, and it looks a little wild right now, but we're going to take care of that. And you can kind of turn and twist as you go, looking for any loops that you might find. There might be some kind of buried in here a little bit. Just go through and look for those loops. Now let's move our scarf far away, because we're going to have a lot of yarn crumbs here. Now our pom-pom looks a little wild, so what we need to do now is just give it a little haircut. So we're just going to cut back and just kind of like make it a little bit more compact looking and a lot neater looking. Okay, so we're trying to get more of a a sphere and less wild hair. So just cut it, and the farther you cut it back, the smaller it's going to be, but also the neater it's going to be. Okay, so just keep going, trimming and trimming, turning your pom-pom as you work. Okay, so once you've gotten it taken down, you see how I'm kind of floofing it, and it knocks some of those crumbs off, and it also reveals to us any long pieces. So you want to go through, you just kind of keep like fluffing it and trimming until your pom-pom looks how you want it to look. So see, I got it, kind of reveals, fluffing it kind of reveals those long spots. Okay, so just keep going through, giving it a trim, and then when you're ready, when you're all finished, we're going to add it to our scarf. All right, now we're ready to add our pom-poms. So like I mentioned before, I'm going to put this down at this end so that it just kind of brings the color through. So we have our strands that we're going to tie it on. Now, we have a very rectangular looking bottom. So what I want to do is sort of cinch it up before we attach the pom-pom so that it'll look a little bit nicer and you won't have, it'll kind of come into the pom-pom instead of just this like big rectangle. So how we're going to do that is thread your needle with one of the pom-pom strands, and then what we're going to do is just start at one end of our scarf here, and we're going to go in and out, nothing fancy, and it's pretty widely spaced as you can see. Just go in and out across. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then come out the bottom. And then we're going to pull our strand through. We have a little cinch, just like that. Now take your other strand, because it's sort of off center now, where our pom-pom's down at this end. So take your other strand, and you're going to go in from this corner, and kind of open it up if you need to. And we're going to do the same thing. So go in and out, nothing fancy, just go in and out all the way across and just pull it this way, okay? So you're sort of like almost like lacing it up, okay? And it makes this lovely little cinch at the bottom, okay? So now we just need to like pull it tight and tie it off. So just tie it really tight, come up under that pom-pom and make sure it's kind of over the scarf so it's not showing. And we're just going to give it some nice strong knots. Now if you are making this for a child size like me, just, you know, this is going to be a very hard working scarf. You know, it might be tossed around, it might be left somewhere. You just have to make sure it's nice and tough and tough wearing, okay? So I did a couple of strong knots. Now the neat thing about this is we don't have to weave anything in because we have a pom-pom here. So we're just going to cut this purple up close to the bottom of our pom-pom and it just blends in. Okay, you don't have to do any more weaving in of ends. So look how pretty that looks. And we're just going to do the same thing for the other side. Now like I mentioned before, I have purple here. So I'm going to kind of dig in my yarn cake to this lighter color yarn and I'm going to do my wraps that way. Now, if you mix your colors, like you can see a little bit where mine looks a little bit variegated. See how there's like the dark purple and then like the more plummy purple here? It does make a really pretty pom-pom. So if you mix your colors up a little bit, that's fun too. So go ahead and make the second one next. Just do the same exact thing. Okay, I went ahead and added the second pom-pom, and I just wanted to point out I made mine stripy, which is just wrapping. For the first half of your wrap, you do one color. For the second half of your wrap, you do the other color. And when the bundle, when you cut it open, it makes a stripe across the middle. Just as a side note, if you wanted to do one of those. And I thought it looked nice with the purple against the white and picking up some of the color. So our scarf is complete. We have knitted it from start to finish and added some fun pom-poms. So that is how you knit the Grape Soda Scarf. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.